Aphoristic Appendage to On Truthtelling. 1251 to 1300. 1251. Thank God for the accumulated knowledge and wisdom of yesteryear. For if we had to depend solely on what we get from today, foolishness running to insanity would have already gone by us at warp speed. 1252. Certain ideas and events generate interest to such an extent that the conversation about them can go on for generations and eventually transform their character from the morally certain to uncertain. At the same time, there is an ongoing process of return to the former by way of viewing a past good as present wrong or a past wrong as present good. Taken as a whole, the contradictory and convoluted nature of morality seems to get straightened out with this reversal which, undoubtedly responding to certain needs and purposes of the present, must abstain from recognizing the latter's power over the past and willingness to persecute as much as honor it. 1253. The day all corruption is gone from politics is the day to believe its pie-in-the-sky promises. 1254. COVID-19 aphorism. Giving the people a universal fear they can't verify for themselves and then pounding it into their heads day and night is a recipe for waking up to a hellish world where politicians have got drunk with power. 1255. Think of all the energy expended in human affairs, be it in times of peace or in times of war, that extends itself to the moment of its virtual non-being, that is, its virtual non-traceability in human affairs. 1256. Perhaps it's the fact that complete scoundrels can so easily come to power that makes it so easy for leaders of opposing parties or enemy nations to treat each other as such. 1257. Take a look at how the First World War got started. Take a look at what can only be called civilized monstrosity. Take a look at all those leaders who, with their high-level responsibilities and large-scale plans, put into play a war machine that, Frankenstein-like, escaped their control and devastated the world. 1258. In public affairs, interest of the most general but contentious sort lies at the extremes not only in the sense of where to find it but what to expect from it. 1259. Aiming at riches and recognition is always but a hair's breadth away from making the sort of compromises that are but a few steps removed from the slightly or sharply descending path of corruption. 1260. COVID-19 aphorism, far more dangerous than the coronavirus, or, for that matter, climate change, is the corruption of our institutions as moral bastions of society. Without these pillars of civilized commerce and behavior, our fate will surely take the form of which Yeats speaks when he announces in his poem, The Second Coming, things fall apart, the center cannot hold / mere anarchy is loosed upon the world. 1261. COVID-19 aphorism, with a both political and popular movement moving the moral compass towards having the highest level of safety for all, we may unwittingly create a monstrous situation posing the greatest threat of all. 1262. During the First World War, Albert Einstein was amazed at the number of eminent scientists, scholars, and statesmen who were willing to jump on the bandwagon of German imperialism. What this indicates along with other historical examples of widespread compliance and complicity is the fact that, when the political winds are blowing strongly, few people want to feel them in their faces instead of squarely on their backs. 1263. What is death if not leaving our human form to return to where we came from by taking us from hellish end conditions to heavenly ones? 1264. There is an amazing homogeneity in the way in which professional news is produced and packaged nowadays. The trust and mistrust it engenders and spreads throughout the land are equally impassioned and self-righteous. 1265. In war, the aggressor often starts off with a series of quick easy victories, but if it ends with his failure to defeat all forces on the field and the enemy still occupying the moral high ground, it will be he who ends up with the bloodiest nose. 1266. In controversial and contentious matters, even the best of heads can take a few cheap shots. 3 reasons for this falling off might be the following. First, no speaker, no matter how brilliant, can have a thorough grasp of every aspect of a subject. Second, where discussion is of a polemical nature, people and positions that are merely in proximity of the enemy camp are often lumped in, which, of course, is an injustice. And third, maintaining a certain rhetorical tone and tenor, whether it be self-righteous, indignant, angry, or merely critical, can hardly avoid the convenience and opportunism of clutching at low-hanging fruit from time to time. 1267. The dreams we have at night give us an insight into what the world would be like if, first, we were suddenly deprived of a few natural laws or logical relations and, second, we still found our lives sufficiently meaningful to want to get somewhere or to the bottom of something. 1268. The ego in deepest slumber is less a matter of amorous adventures, of victories achieved, of grandiose plans and projects than of simply trying to best navigate in the dream world and make sense of it. 1269. The thousands of people who die every day from war, disease, and other causes are not our brothers and sisters but rather phantom creatures, said one who, for fear of public ridicule, preferred to remain anonymous. Only those whom we have known and loved can ever rise to the level of consanguineous recognition, solidarity, and bonding that allows them, even in death, to take on flesh. 1270. Teaching a population to be unnecessarily fearful is just as foolish or nefarious as not warning them sufficiently about a grave danger in a dream world and make sense of it. 1271. If a moralist is someone who necessarily elevates himself while lowering others, then there is an inherent contradiction in his socio-psychological makeup, always capable of turning virtue to vice, good to evil. 1272. What seems to be in the air nowadays is the faith that human beings can improve their relations to an almost unheard of degree by wedding sensitivity with social responsibility. What seems to be ignored at the same time are the forces both inside and outside of us that, after a long or even a short sleep, can suddenly erupt. 1273. Politics is where the idealistic secretly meets and makes love with the unscrupulous while violently disowning it. 1274. COVID-19 aphorism: the thinking of all governments in the world today seems to be, now that people are fearful, let's keep it that way because anger as hate speech is wholly unacceptable. 1275. All governments do bad shit. However, it's only later ones that admit this by blaming past ones for having fucked up. 1276. Philosophy, which has been around for over 2,000 years and upholds truth as its highest value, has a history full of arguments and counterarguments, both great and small. Its history is, indeed, essentially these arguments without end. Now, take politics. Does anyone seriously think that, given philosophy's track record, political thought or theory will lead to anything conclusive? Does anyone believe that, whether it be under the auspices of the so-called left or right, political argument will lead to a conclusion which is separate from, if one is lucky, a leap of faith taking us towards values and practices that sustain a people for a certain period of time, or, if one is unlucky, a play of forces that manage to coerce and enthrall a people for, once again, a certain period of time? 1277. From being an ideologue to becoming a revolutionary is the step from thinking all opponents to be wrong to thinking them not only wrong but dangerous. 1278. Perhaps the best way to distinguish a conspiracy theorist who, in line with the popular sense of the term, is a charlatan and one who isn't is to ask oneself, does this person lay claim to a perfect or near-perfect knowledge of the subject? If so, then he must give full and due evidence of this. If he fails in doing so, then he can be safely dismissed. 1279. The rallying cry of a straight-talking, no-holds-barred revolutionary might be, tear it up by the very roots. This system of government is a vile, poisonous plant. Whatever grows after it, no matter how bitter its fruit may be, will surely be better than this monstrosity. 1280. It is to be noted that large-scale reforms are quite often popular with those who, if sacrifices are involved, get off lightly. 1281. This eternally imperfect world, feeling empathy for others, if it's the slightest bit false, and this is often the case when the talk is about the sufferings of a large number of faceless others, is only a hair's breadth away from taking one's own feelings to be the measure of all things and the pole towards which all else should gravitate. On the other hand, having no empathy for others, and, in particular, for that large number of faceless others, always runs the risk of becoming monstrous when combined with power and, in particular, with great power. 1282. The Communist Manifesto is where begins that great discourse which, in the area of politics, allows what is essentially religious to pose as being scientific. 1283. How can politicians teach us about morality when so few of them teach it by example? 1284. Technology, optimistically viewed, is what is forever improving the human condition. Technology, pessimistically viewed, is what is waiting for the next monster to take it over. 1285. Thinking that technology, any kind of technology, and this includes systems of government, will save us from catastrophe which has its seeds in the human heart and, to put it in the most far-reaching way, the mind of God, is the greatest delusion there can be. 1286. As history shows, all great plans to improve the world must falter and perhaps even fail, at least, morally or humanly speaking, when they have to deal with the issue of what to do with those who get in the way or even seem to get in the way of their realization. 1287. The problem with most politicians is they are technocrats at heart who only give second consideration to matters of the heart. 1288. If there ever comes a day when public figures, eminent or not so eminent, spend at least 10% of their time engaged in self-critique as opposed to merely criticizing others, there will be correspondingly at least 10 times more honesty in the world. 1289. It seems to be the default position of many on the left that, if someone is on the right, they must be either less moral or intelligent than they are. Along with those who think there is nothing wrong with this attitude or outlook, the people who hold this superior view of themselves must be, unwilling as they are to engage in any radical self-critique, bereft of the most sensitive moral antennae. 1290. What if it were true that all the greatest benefits to humanity are indissociably linked to its greatest crimes? What if all the greatest empires throughout history, Egyptian, Greek, Roman, French, English, Russian, and so on, bore ample testimony to this terrifying, intolerable, unforgivable, and therefore largely ignored fact? 1291. Anything taken to extremes becomes a negative. Today we have a collective preoccupation with safety and security, not to mention comfort, that promises to turn some future crisis into a catastrophe. 1292. Yes, political courage and wisdom exist, but all too often not before the catastrophe, child of their absence, is upon us. 1293. The future, be it near at hand or as distant as can be, is full of those elements or activities that, either coming together or falling apart, either happening as predictable outcomes or operating as secret processes, constitute what we call events great and small, as well as history, development, progress, decline, death, and rebirth. 1294. What is morality? Many things, but one thing it must surely be is an opportunity for a good many people to feel superior to a good many others. 1295. A few hours before the storm broke, it was sunny and beautiful. A week or so before the stock market crashed, the general mood was confident and optimistic. 1296. If everyone could be judged on the basis of a single, inappropriate act, who should escape whipping? 1297. One should not confuse science or knowledge with wisdom. The first is proper for following specific paths to success, the second for not only weighing success and failure as cohabitants in this world, but also for coming to terms with this. 1298. Self-interest masked as social concern is so widespread that even its most crass if not grotesque manifestations in the political and corporate world must be regarded as a form of self-protection that can only come from belonging to the herd. 1299. One anomaly in the present-day pedagogy is that, while youngsters are taught to reject violence, hate, and prejudice in the real world, total immersion and engagement in a virtual one that parallels these forbidden elements on the level of fantasy meets with little or no disapproval or outlook. The people who hold this superior view of themselves must be, unwilling as they are to engage in any radical. 1300. If we are to believe geologists, paleontologists, and natural historians, we are the crowning achievement of catastrophe, or, rather, a series of catastrophes. On the other hand, if one rejects this anthropocentric view,